rulethewasteland.com. These are, I just got these up on Teespring. I'm really happy with it. This particular tri-blend shirt is a lot like the shirts that I wear on a daily basis anyway, super comfortable. The next, if you buy one, the design will be a little bit higher. I noticed that this, it's not bad, but as you can see when I'm standing, it's sort of like centered. I'm going to have it like just a little bit taller. So if you get it, it'll just be a little bit bigger. But there's a couple different designs on there, so check it out. Happy with those. Anyways, this video is about yet another shit hit the fan movie that I will be giving a review on the lessons that can be learned for survivalists, for preparedness, for any sort of disaster just situation. As I always mention, yes, it's a movie. That doesn't mean we can't look at the things in there, get our minds working, and come up with what we would have done in those scenarios, or maybe just kind of jumpstart our thinking on how to be more prepared or how to react in certain situations, things like that. If you've thought about scenarios before, if they really happen in real life, you're going to react just that much quicker and not have to spend time thinking about what you would do because you've already thought about it at least a little bit. And it's fun if nothing else. As I've mentioned before, if you like movie reviews, you can check out podcast Faint Praise. I think the latest episode we did was pretty funny, and that I did with my girlfriend. It's just movies, so it has nothing to do with preparedness. So check that out. Link will be in the description right next to my beautiful shirts. So let's get started. This movie is The Blackout. It's on Amazon. If you have Prime, it's actually free. So that also will be in the description if you want to sign up for Prime. And if not, it's probably $2.99 or something to rent. You know, the rental prices are not ridiculous. And it's a pretty decent movie, actually. This movie is not too bad. You know, it's lower budget. Got a little bit of cheese, a little bit of, you know, not the best acting in it. But overall, I thought this was a pretty decent depiction of a widespread blackout, shit hit the fan type movie. So the movie opens to introduce a couple characters. You have a husband and a wife that are just driving along, and then they talk a little bit. It cuts to a couple what appear to be recently graduated college students who are out on some kind of fairly off-grid camping trip to, I guess, a graduation trip of some kind. And they seem, in some ways, they seem fairly inept for being this kind of like off-grid, because I don't think the the people who made the movie realized like they have them arguing over the map, and he's like, I think you have it upside down. If you are so discombobulated that you don't even know which way you have the map pointing, that's pretty bad, because that means you don't even know which way is north. You don't have a compass on. You can't even use the sun. They're outside in the daylight to determine which way is even your cardinal directions. Obviously, there's going to be a little bit of a difference because the sun is not always directly, you know, due east, west, or whatever. It can be lower in the sky or whatever, depending on time of year. And the maps, depending on where you are in the world, will have a declination angle, which means the north from the compass is not the north that is on the map. So magnetic north and true north. In certain parts of the country, those are farther apart than in other places where they might be very close. Usually a map, if it's a decent map, will tell you what the declination angle is in degrees, and you can use things like, I think I even have one, yeah, like a protractor, like this is the ones we use in the military, and they have, you know, different degree markings on here or on the edges, so you can put it in here and tell how far your azimuths would be off. So that's a little bit complicated. Anyways, in either case, you should at least be able to tell which way your map is pointing. And if you're at night or whatever, or I mean not at night, but if you're terrain features, you've got the sun. If you don't have a compass, either of those should be able to help you figure that out. But so I'll have links to stuff like this in the description for maybe some decent compasses and protractor. And having maps is important because I have this road atlas to cover the entire country in case I have to travel. Let me see if they have the declination angle listed in here. Okay, so this is just a road map, so it doesn't have the declination angles in here. For the most part, they're showing a pretty large area, like an entire state or a big portion of a state, so the declination angle isn't really come into play as much. But if you get a good topographical map of an area, it'll have that stuff on there. So anyways, this is all going to say that you should be able to use your map, especially if you're going to go backcountry camping. And at the very, very least, you should at least know which way it's pointing. Another thing you might want to consider is a decent map case, which you can get to where it has maybe canvas or nylon on one side and a clear waterproof cover on the other. And usually, hopefully rubberized for the whole thing, which makes your map waterproof, so you can open it up and read it without having to worry about it getting damaged, torn, or wet. And also, if you want, you can use grease pencils on the outside of that film and then wipe it off with an alcohol wipe or something like that without actually marking up your map and risking permanently smudging it or whatever. And a red light. If you want to be able to use your map at light or at night with nobody seeing you, you can use the red light lens on a flashlight, and it won't get rid of your night vision quite as badly as using a white light, and it won't be seen visible for as far away, so you won't give away your position either. So they introduce a couple more characters: a small town sheriff and a what later turns out to be a prepper of sorts, played by Costas Mandylor, his brother Louis Mandylor, I think, is one who actually directed this, and I know who that is because I used to love the show Martial Law, and he was one of the cops who is Sammo Hung's, I don't know, entourage, along with Kelly who always wore like amazingly tight vinyl pants. That's why I like that show so much, and of course the Kung Fu. And so the prepper guy, it shows him using some kind of radio. I'm not an expert on radios. It might be a CB radio just based on the handset. Of course, it could be a ham or shortwave too, but I don't know. But it's useful to have things like that as well. I know Rogue Preparedness has done some videos on delicious hams lately, and so you should go check those out. But it comes into play a little bit later too, that the radio contact. So pretty early on in the movie, you see the lights go out, basically shows the city go dark, and then you start to see the characters having to deal with it. At this point, you don't know exactly what has happened, but the initial couple that is shown, they actually have driven to the small town with the sheriff and Costas Mandylor, and so they realize that the power has gone out. And she goes to use the sink too, and it has also stopped working. Which, if your power initially goes out, it depends on what your setup are. If you're in a place that's using pumps of some kind, your water's not going to work. If you're in a place that has a water tower, you might get a few hours of pressure and things left until whatever is in the water tower gets used up, and then they can't pump any more up there. So if you still have water when there is a power outage and you don't have all your water needs taken care of, you should fill as many things as you can, the bathtub, whatever containers you have, especially if you think it's going to be a long-term event. Like if you've noticed if there's an EMP, if every electronic is broken, things like that. But even if it's not, you should try to fill some jugs or even some empty 2 liters if you have them. Just whatever, because it's never bad to have more water. And if the water's still running, you might as well take advantage of that. It also shows the prepper guy, Costas Mandylor. He has a generator. Which that's awesome. He has a few cans of gas for it. It shows at least. It only shows 2, which is probably not enough if you really are going to be relying on a generator for more than a couple days. If a generator is a big part of your plan, you need to store as much fuel as you realistically can, either legally, logistically, whatever. Because if you're actually running things off and running that for a few hours a day, you could easily go through a few gallons of gas a day. So if you have 10 gallons, that might be good for 5 days or whatever, but if this is a prolonged thing, you're going to want a lot more than that for sure. It also showed him running the generator indoors, or in some kind of like shed or back room, which is not necessarily a good idea. You need to make sure you have ventilation. There's been a lot of people you can get carbon monoxide poisoning, you can die if you run the generator indoors, so you either need to have exhaust pumped outside or be in a room. If it's a shed or something, it's not as big of a deal, but you still need to realize that it's been running in there, and you're not going to want to go in there. So I definitely would have to recommend that you modify a shed if you're going to be running a generator in the shed. It is a good idea to have it indoors if possible, simply for the noise, so people can't hear it from miles away. But you definitely need to have some kind of ventilation, and probably more than just like a vent in the roof or something like that. Either a fan, even a tiny little fan in a small shed that could pull the air out would work, or the actual exhaust piped through the side of the shed or something like that, which would make it a little bit louder. But yeah, you don't want to die of carbon monoxide poisoning for sure. So that's something you guys need to be aware of when using generators, when using stoves. Certainly any gasoline engines or anything that has an exhaust of any kind, yeah, you need ventilation for sure. So the sheriff goes to the general store in the town and is slowly starting to find out that this is a really widespread event. His deputies raiding in from like the prison, and they're talking like it looks like someone may have escaped. They said they're doing a head count, but it doesn't look good. And so they said the whole city's out, and looks like the big cities are out, like New York and I don't exactly know where it is. Looks like it might be in Maine or something like that. But regardless, I'm guessing somewhere on the East Coast. And they're saying that the big cities looks like they're out too. It could be the whole world for all they know. What they do know, or what you would know in this situation, what you and I would know, is that it doesn't appear to be some kind of EMP or CME event because the vehicles are working, electronics are working. There's just no grid electricity, which is a big deal. Obviously, the biggest difference between an EMP event and just a straight up power loss is just that the vehicles would be able to be used. And obviously, if you had generators and flashlights and things like that too. But most people, it would be really the same. I mean, they're not prepared with electronic devices that would actually help them, like flashlights and generators. So the only things that they would really lose would be, their phones wouldn't work, things like that. But obviously, it is much better to not have to deal with a total loss of everything. Like I said, vehicles and generators, things like that being the big ones. But so he goes to this small town store, and people are already starting to like fight over the last couple bags of ice, and the store's already pretty much been cleaned out. So, like I've always said, it could be pretty quick in these situations before things start getting pretty hairy. It would not be nearly as fast, I don't think, with this type of scenario because the police would still be able to drive around, still be able to use their radios, their electronics, hospitals and things like that. Backup generators would still be working. If you have an EMP event and literally everything is dark, nothing works, I think people would realize a lot sooner that exactly how serious this is. With a power outage, even if they think it's widespread, people are going to assume that just there's only one thing that needs to be fixed. The power somewhere just needs to come back on. If they realize that everything's cooked and the cops can't even respond, I can't even imagine what a city like New York would be like once people realize that the cops can't even drive around. It would be absolute chaos. But even in a small town like this, you're starting to see tensions rise even on day one, which I think is realistic. So the husband of the married couple starts going around the house and just taking inventory of the small things that they have, getting out a flashlight, and she says something about candles, and he's like, I got the candles. And it just made me think how terrible candles actually are as a lighting choice. They're really, really ineffective and have a lot of downsides. That's not to say that you shouldn't have any or that that they wouldn't be useful, because obviously if you have no power, they're certainly better than nothing. But they don't last all that long. I mean, like you'll get a few hours out of a candle, but the amount of light that they get is not very much. There is a danger element to them being like tipped over or something like that. They can be blown out really easily if you don't have some sort of candle lantern or something. So having candles around is fine if you like them, but I definitely recommend trying to go with something either like electrical or backup being like a propane lantern or something like that, and then just have the candles as like an emergency situation, because some of these flashlights or headlamps or LED lanterns, you can set them on firefly mode or the 1.5 or 1 lumen setting, and they'll go for literally days on a single battery, much more longer than a can. It's much more even lighting. The spectrum of the light is usually a lot better than just the yellowish candlelight. You can see things a little bit better. So something like that would be a lot better than just trying to rely on candles. I would definitely have some. I have a few. There's nothing wrong with having them, but in terms of using it, like doing anything by candlelight is very difficult unless you're like right there. So I would definitely not have that be your primary source of light for shit hit the fan preparedness. Hell, even a box of chem lights is probably better than candles in a lot of situations. So the prepper guy's trying to get his buddy on that he's playing chess with on his radio again, and at this point I'm pretty sure it's a shortwave radio. They show the transceiver for a second, but he can't get him for a second. Eventually he does get the guy on the radio, and he says that he's in Colorado and it appears that the whole country's out of power. So at this point you would want to be getting pretty damn serious, because regardless of the cause, like I've said in a lot of my videos before, the only real way to have a true kind of Mad Max shit the fan scenario is with a widespread grid down scenario. No matter what causes it, if the grid is down over a large area, especially the entire country or even beyond, things are going to get super serious. Shit just got real, as the man says. So you would want to, if you hadn't already, which if you'd had power out in a large area for a few days, you would already want to be in go time mode. You would definitely be on high alert, if once you figure that out. Interesting note is that I would suspect that after an event like that, where power was out in the entire country, that you would get a lot better results if you did have power for your communications, for radios, whatever. There would be a ton less interference by factors of millions potentially. No cell phones, no other radio waves out there, no any sort of electromagnetic radiation pollution from other signals of every kind, that's out there right now. So I would imagine, depending on the type of radio, it might be better for some, better for others. But I would guess you would get a lot more range and things, a lot less interference with any type of communication system that you would still be able to be using. So the sheriff starts a town meeting and is trying to explain to everyone what's going on. He brings in someone from the local hydroelectric plant to say that the computers had just all gone offline. They don't know why. People in the crowd are actually discussing that it's not an EMP. They know enough to know that if it was some kind of EMP or nuclear attack, that more electronics would not be working, not just the power's out. But they don't know what it is. At this point, my suspicions would be that it was some kind of probably cyber attack on the grid, or it could be an innocuous cause, but something that just caused a cascading failure of the grid, which I don't think would cover the whole country, probably just a regional thing, depending on how the grid is, interconnected. Because I know that in some situations, if you have a power, and especially for the larger cities, if a power plant goes down, they'll try to split the load amongst the other nearby power plants so that they're not completely without power. And if it's too much, maybe that could cause failures as well. Who knows? But that's unlikely to cause through multiple regions, across the whole country and things like that. So my suspicions would be a cyber attack of some kind, and that, from a foreign country or even some rogue element within the country, something like that. But the prepper guy people are already starting to get nervous, and the sheriff's talking about splitting the rations of the town, that they don't have that many. And the prepper guy stands up and is basically like, you guys have no idea what's coming. They're going to be pouring out of the cities. They're going to be here. And they're like, oh, what? We're 100 miles from the city, which obviously that's not that far. If you're, that's, far less than a tank of gas for most cars. Most normal cars getting anywhere from 25 to 35 miles per gallon with a 10-gallon, 12-gallon tank, some even more. Then you're certainly, even if they don't have a full tank of gas, they'll be able to make it out. And they probably would be. At 5 days, a major city is going to be, could be a war zone. You know what I mean? So there are definitely people are going to be leaving. And sure enough, you see that it shows a van stopped by the side of the road, and a family stops and they say, hey, can you help us? And it turns out to be some of these escaped convicts, and they kill the husband and just drive off with the the wife in the car, and they steal her car too. So it's already starting to have people pour out of the cities and start to get crazy. This is why, if these people certainly driving knew of the situation, everyone in the country knew about it. This is why you need to be armed. Everyone with you needs to be armed, needs to be on high alert. Your wife and even your kids need to know how to use weapons and be willing to use them. And you shouldn't be helping people. I mean, that's just the way it is. It may sound mean, but like I said, resource allocation is a zero-sum game. Anything you give to someone else, whether that's time, the risks that you're taking, any food, any water, that's coming directly out of your family's mouths. So I would be extremely, extremely reluctant to help anyone that wasn't in extremely dire need in a situation like that, or someone that I knew. Certainly not if just these two dudes need help changing a tire or something like that. I'd be like, sorry, man, we're not even slowing down. So the husband and wife duo, the wife starts having some kind of bleeding and cramps because she's pregnant, and so they realize something bad is going to happen, or is happening, obviously. And so they try to go to the hospital, but part of the way out of town, their vehicle gets a flat. So they realize that they can't, because they don't have enough gas anyway. You realize that they just have to go back to town. And on the way back, it's at night, and they start seeing crowds of people that are like right when they turn around, that are coming from the city. They just have flashlights, but nothing else, and they start banging on the car and whatnot. So once again, like I said, you have to be ready to be in defense mode all the time if you're in a situation like this. You should definitely be armed. You should plan ahead of time what you're going to do if you have a flat tire, if you encounter people, whatnot. And he sort of just starts saying, no, no, no. And I said, I would just floor it and get out of there. People start banging on the car, then they have let you know that they're willing to hurt you, or at least cause you some serious problems. So while you might not want to jump right to plowing into them and running them over, because that can hurt your car, among other reasons, bust a radiator or something like that. But you definitely need to get out of there, because they could start breaking windows. You don't know if any of them are armed or whatnot, so you need to get the hell out of there. They eventually do pull away. It cuts to the morning when the sheriff is trying to do some rationing. He's doing it in a really bad way, because he's doing it outside from the back of a pickup truck in a way that he can't logistically control it. He doesn't appear to have deputized anyone or have anyone really helping him. It's just basically just him, which is also a terrible idea. And he has all the supplies just sitting there in the back of the truck. So as expected, the crowd starts to get restless. The the husband shows up and starts saying, "Hey, my wife is hurt, whatever," and he says, "Take him to Jimmy," which is the prepper guy. He used to be an army medic, but I can't help you. And all of a sudden, a fight breaks out, and he has to pull his gun and say, "Hey, everybody, better back up." But then he gets shot, and it's actually the convicts, and the convicts end up stealing the food and saying, "Hey, if you in the truck the food is in," and saying, "Hey, if you want to live, come with us." And some of the more miscreant type of the townspeople jump on the truck with him, but not before they shoot a couple of the townspeople who tried to fight back. One in particular, first of all, the cop wasn't wearing a vest. I don't know if in a small town like that, you probably wouldn't wear one on an everyday basis, but hopefully you would at least have one, and you should be wearing it once you realize things have gotten that serious. And then the townsperson who tries to shoot at the convicts, he steps out from behind the car to shoot at them and gets blasted, which is not a good idea. You would want to stay behind cover, potentially even move to greater cover, and then take some well-aimed fire at them, not just jump out of your car and face them dead on. So that's not a smart idea. So the convicts end up getting away with the gear and taking some of the townspeople with them. So the prepper guy, Jimmy, is actually sitting, has his gun with him, which is exactly what you should be doing, but he's using the generator to run some old home movies and reminiscing about presumably his wife. And the gas eventually runs out, and then the TV cuts off. But this makes me think of something that a lot of people don't do, and it's if you have a generator, most of the time you're not going to be running things at the capacity of what the generator is really producing or could produce. So if you can at all manage it, it's a great idea to have some kind of battery bank that can actually store the power that you're generating. Because if you're going to burn up that gas anyway, and you're just running a TV and a DVD player or something like that, the generator is creating a lot more power than you need just to run those things. So if you can store that power in any form, that's good, and it would actually make your gas go farther, and then you can recharge smaller device. You could even run something like a TV and a DVD player off of the batteries, and you don't have to run the gen. And that way you can run the generator at different times too. You don't have to run it, maybe in the middle of the night when everyone would hear it. You can run it whenever you need to, and just store power in the battery banks and then use it as needed. And this goes for any sort of power generation, whether that's a windmill, whether that's some kind of hand crank, whatever, it doesn't matter. Water powered. If you have to be able to store the power to really make the most use of whatever you're generating. And something as simple as a set of deep cycle batteries can do that for you, and then an inverter. But a charge controller maybe, depending on your setup. And then I would definitely not use a TV. TVs probably aren't super big power draws, but something even like if you can digitize all the stuff that you might want to be watching, either on DVDs or just digital media, and store that, then you can watch on like a little laptop or a netbook or even a tablet, something that uses very, very little power, and you still get the same amount of entertainment. He's watching on like an old tube TV, which probably isn't a huge power draw, but it's going to be a lot more than like a Chromebook or something like that, or a cell phone. If you have a little phone like this that even if it's not connected to the web or connected to the cell signal, you can still watch videos on it and things like that. You would have to get the digitized version, but yeah, something like a laptop is probably your best bet. And same with lights, you want to go with LEDs, not incandescent or even CFL. CFL bulbs don't use nearly as much power as incandescent bulbs, but they still use more than LEDs, and they're a lot more fragile. I've never liked them. They tend to go dim on you after a while. They're physically more fragile, and they just don't last as long, and they don't work as well. So it's much better to just get LEDs. They're a little bit more expensive. These days you can get LED bulbs so cheap. You can get like 4-watt LED bulbs or something that are going to still light up a whole room, and those would run a long time off a charged battery. So once he loses power, the prepper guy, he has a lantern, appears to be a propane lantern, and he's got a gun with him and another one leaning against the wall, so he's at least prepared in that respect. He doesn't have any, or doesn't appear to have any sort of body armor, which I think is something that a lot of preppers leave out. It's much better idea to spend a couple $100 on a bulletproof vest than it is to buy your 5th, 6th, 20th gun or whatever, because that's something that's going to come in a lot more handy. You can only use 1 or 2 guns at once, and making yourself functionally bulletproof, at least over your vital organs, is a huge, huge benefit. So he doesn't have that. Also, he doesn't have a good weapon light. He has like a flashlight that appears to be taped to his gun, and so he hears a noise outside, and he turns his flashlight on and starts charging out there, which is, you want to be really careful with weapon lights because you're basically showing everyone where you are. So if you have a kind of pressure switch or something, that's a much better idea. You can just pop it on real quick, see what you need to see, and then let go and move. So if they shoot even where they saw the light, you're not necessarily going to be standing there still. But to have it on the whole time, they may see you coming well before you even see them. Even if you're inside the house, they can see the light shining around the corners and whatnot, light up a whole room and see the movement. So if possible, obviously something like night vision would be fantastic. That's not feasible for a lot of people just due to the cost. But if you do have a flashlight, you want to use it sparingly, or use it just when you need to, and not just leave it on the whole time, because that could give away your position. So he catches some guy like rustling through his shed and scares him off, and then the husband is actually there too and tells him that the wife needs help. So he leaves his place and goes over to theirs with some supplies and whatnot. Then the camping kids that we haven't seen in a while, they stumble out of the woods. Their car is gone. It's been stolen. So they're stumbling around trying to find a way. They don't know what's happened yet, and they get into a gas station that has been basically completely ransacked. There's a smashed car, and they see a big blood stain and some shotgun shells, and then there's just stuff strewn everywhere. And they don't know the extent of what's going on, obviously, but they know something's crazy's happened because they see a car and try to flag it down, and it just blows right by them. None of them have cell signal, and so they're starting to get worried. But they leave a lot. There's a lot of stuff that's strewn out on the parking lot of the gas station. That a lot of it's garbage, but you see like a roll of duct tape and a few other things. And I would definitely be grabbing that stuff, because something weird is going on, and any sort of resource can be beneficial at that point. Certainly something like duct tape, and maybe even some extra clothes, or if there's certainly any food or water, which there wouldn't likely to be. And the gas station has a sign that says no gas, so they know things are bad, but they don't know how bad yet. So the kids are starting to realize how serious everything is, and they move on to the next or first real house that they find instead of the gas station. And they're trying to get anybody's attention. There doesn't appear to be anyone there. And they're like, oh, I guess the next house. And one of the guys says, no, let's break in here and need some food. So he just busts it. Actually, the door is unlocked, and they just go in. And they do find they can't find anybody in the house. They do start to find some food and things like that. So they're at least taking advantage of the resources, however unscrupulous it may be. And eventually they find the husband and wife are dead in the bed. It looks like the wife died of some unknown illness or cause, and then the husband shot himself. So the one smart thing that the guy does is takes the gun out of his hand, so they're at least armed at this point. And they have a little bit of food, and they start to talk about how this may be a widespread thing. They're starting to realize that there's no power there. There's nobody in the village. Everyone seems to have left, so they think that this might be a little more serious. So at the very least, they have gotten a little tiny bit of food, some jars of pickles and some cans, and he did get a weapon, the one guy did. When they're moving on, they actually come up to the prepper's house, because he's out taking care of the man's husband, who's maybe having a miscarriage. And they knock and realize there's no one there, and decide to break in. So the guy hits the doorknob basically with a giant rock and blasts the door open, which is evidence of why you need to have some sort of beefiness added to your door, whether that's a strike plate, a metal strike plate with big lag bolts into the door frame, or something like an on guard, or some sort of door blocking device, anything like that, something to make your doors a little more robust, because most break-ins occur at just the door. It can just be kicked in, knocked in with a rock or something like that, lockpicked. So it's really beneficial, especially in a situation like that, to have something that you can do to make your doors a little bit more robust. Even if that means, if you're leaving the house, I would certainly physically block at least all but one door, that you have to come in and out. Maybe even block all your bottom doors and leave through some other window or something if you can, if you have a way to do something like that, just so people can't get in easily. Because he has boarded up all the lower windows, but the one door that didn't have any glass in it, they were still able to just blast in, and then he comes and opens the front door. So if ideally you want to be able to find a way to prevent that from happening. It's hard in some places, especially if you rent. You can't do a lot of additions or changes to the place, or if you have like a sliding glass door, is really hard to bolster in any significant way, because it's giant pane of glass. It's never going to be hard to break in. But maybe think about having some resources on hand that if things do get bad, you can block it some way with either plywood or something like that. But it's something to think about at least. So they start to find all the supplies he has, which is they're in like an attic room or something. But that's another point, is that if you're in a situation like this and you realize things have gotten that bad, not only do you want to secure your house, but you probably want to secure or hide as much of your supplies within your house as you can too. If you can lock them up in cabinets or totes or something, just to make it even just a little bit more difficult for people to either see or take, your stuff if they do manage to break in. And the people, as they're taking this stuff, it shows them grabbing all canned goods, which obviously food is food, but canned goods are probably not the best, calorie per space item that you can get. There's very few canned goods that have over a few hundred calories per can, and they're very heavy because they include the water. If you could get things like bags of rice or oats or things like that, you would get a lot more food in like a backpack or something like that if you do have a chance to gather as much supplies as you can carry in pretty much any scenario, whether that's you come across a store or you at the store and you realize something's happened and you need to buy as much as possible. Dense foods are canned goods are great for storage, they're great for variety. There's really nothing wrong with canned goods, but in terms of how much you can get per unit space or per unit weight, they're pretty low on the list because they take up a lot of space and they're very heavy for what they are. So because they're already cooked and they contain a lot of water, it's just not that much food in one can. I mean, you're talking about even really like calorie dense foods like canned chili and beans and things like that. You're still gonna need, several cans of food per day per person. So just grabbing a backpack, and if you get something like green beans, there's only like 70 calories in a can of green beans. So you have almost, that's almost nothing. You would need dozens of cans, So canned goods are not the best. They're great for storage, especially if you can do the eat what you store what you eat kind of thing. But for scavenging and things like that, it should be pretty low on your list unless you have a lot of space and the ability to take a lot of weight. But they notice that the car is coming back, his truck, which he has like a diesel 4x4 truck, which is a good vehicle for a shit hit the fan scenario. He notices there's something wrong with the door, and he is carrying his sidearm, which you should, like I always say, you should always be carrying, so he does that right. And he gets inside the house and is looking for his way around, and they manage to like open the door into his face and knock him over and run out. And as they're running away, he takes a shot at one and manages to wing the girl in the arm. But when he turns around and he realizes it's like a young girl, he kind of like just gives up and it's just like, damn it. And so they take off with. He had a lot of food in the attic, so they don't do any. Doesn't appear to have done any serious damage to his stores. But obviously, you're gonna want to worry about security as much as possible because this was a group of like 4 people who just had the one gun and weren't really willing or ready to use it. If it had been a group of more people or more armed people, it could have been a big problem for him. So obviously, if you can come up with some way to some sort of not even alarm system, but something that can tell you when you're coming back to your house if you have to leave. Obviously, you should only leave if you really need to in a situation like that. But if you can set up something so that when you come back, you can tell before even getting in the house if there's someone in the house. It might be difficult to come up with different ways to do that, but you probably could. You could set up a wire system that all the doors are connected to, so if any door opens, something on the outside just like falls over or something like that. Anything, something to let you know not to just walk in blind, because if it had been a more malicious group or more capable group and they were in waiting for him with a bunch of weapons and multiple people, he would have been totally done for. After getting winged by the prepper, the kids run off into the woods, and eventually they come upon a camp that turns out to be the camp that the convicts and everything are in. So the one guy and his girlfriend go off while the girlfriend who was shot and her boyfriend kind of stay there. And then the convicts come back, and at first they don't realize that they're bad, obviously, but they stay there anyway, which at that point you have to assume that everyone is dangerous or a threat at that point, and you don't just want to be standing in their camp when they show up, which is exactly what they're doing. And they pretend to be nice at first, and then just grab them and basically kidnap them at that point. And the other 2 are in the woods, and right before that happened, they saw the wife and the daughter that were from that minivan earlier in the movie, and they're like have been shot and left for dead in the woods. So they realize that there's bad people there. And by the time they go back, they're just in time to see them get kidnapped, and then so they have to leave. They don't know what's happened yet. But at this point, I don't know exactly who has the weapon. I think it's the guy that has not been kidnapped, but I'm not 100% sure. So after the wife recovers from whatever her medical condition was, they go to stay with the prepper guy, which is a very good idea for both parties. If you trust each other, certainly you want to have as many numbers as possible if you have the resources. It's good for the prepper because he has more people to help protect his stuff and stand guard, whatever you need to do, and it's good for them because for the same reason and because he has the food, he has weapons, things like that. So after the kids get kidnapped, to prevent the woman from being taken advantage of, the boyfriend says, hey, I know where there's a lot of food, to basically buy some sort of goodwill or buy time or whatever. He tells them about the prepper's house and where all the food is. So the gang of criminals go up to the house basically, and besiege the house. And their plan, the main leader of that group, his plan, he says, me and these two guys are going to go around back. In 20 seconds, you start opening fire in the house. But then they go in through the back. So it's a really dumb idea because you don't want your own people shooting into a house when you're going in the back. That's a pretty dumb idea. But they do, the prepper and the other people see them coming because they just roll up, with their lights on and everything in vehicles. So they see him coming. He has enough weapons to arm the man and his wife, which is great, obviously. And even has some shooting slots cut into the boards that he's boarded up on the front of the house. If I saw a group like that, and there's only about 5 or 6 people that have guns in the group, I think, and they have 3 people in their group with guns. So if you look out and you see a big group of people like that armed, they're probably not there to sing you some Christmas carols. So in a shit the fan without real law situation like that, I would most likely just open fire on them first. You could easily take out certainly 2 people. Each person you say on my count, bam, you each take out a person, and probably unless they're trained in some way, and because they're all just standing there, they don't have body armor, they're not behind cover or anything, you could probably get most of them in an initial salvo, maybe even enough to scare them away. And if not, you've certainly cut down on their numbers. But in this case, they wait for them to do something first, which is probably the more ethical or moral thing to do. Maybe, depends. But it depends on how good your read is of what their intentions are. In this case, it seems pretty obvious from the way it's presented that they're there because they have prisoners. They're holding the kids at gunpoint and everything. They're up to no good. So a shootout ensues at the house, and I'm not going to give away the ending of the movie because it's not really that applicable to the survival lessons necessarily. I will let you guys watch the movie if you want to. Like I said, it's on Amazon. If you don't have Prime, sign up for the Chase Amazon card. You get 5% cash back on any Prime purchases, which basically, with all the stuff I buy on Prime, it pays for Prime for the year. Because Prime is like $100 a year, but you do get the free 2-day shipping, you get all the free videos and a bunch of other stuff. So it depends on how much you get, if it's worth it or not. But I'll have links to that credit card and the Prime movie below. And if you're not interested in Prime, I think it's just $2 or $3 to rent the movie. But all in all, I like the movie. It's pretty good, realistic. Oh, I forgot one of the important things at the very end of the movie, right after the shootout and everything, the power just comes back on. So you don't know what happened. But anyways, overall, I like the movie, and it's pretty decent. Obviously, not amazing. It's a fairly low budget, but well-made movie. I like the way it portrays the power outage and the realistic situations that you encounter in this small town, which I looked up and is actually in Massachusetts, not Maine. So I got the general landscape right. Definitely called the area pretty close, 1 or 2 states away, so not that bad, just based on looking at the the footage and the landscape. I've been all over the United States, so I can get a pretty good feel of where stuff is most of the time. I'm down to 3 states that I haven't been to yet, which is Alaska, Hawaii, and North Dakota. So I'm not going to be able to knock those out in one trip, but pretty close. So check out the movie, guys, and let me know what you think. For me, the survival lessons from this movie, pretty similar to a lot of the movies, with the exception that we didn't see the people being totally stupid with the like the soy boy behavior or the women trying to get rid of the guns, any of that, which is very refreshing. There's another movie that I watched that I just watched not too long ago that I'm going to do a review on, and I have to say it's one of the most frustrating in that regard. Pretty bad. But this one, the guy just needed more gas, more house hardening, and he was good about always being on alert. Some of the characters messed that up. So in general, nothing too many major offenses committed by people other than stuff that people would really mess up in real life. But as always, the lessons are you're just going to have more of what you need. Got to be on high alert and be ready for some crazy shenanigans once you realize that things have gotten this bad. And even if things aren't that bad, even in a normal situation, you just want to be wary. Always be aware of the possibilities. Be polite and have a plan to kill everyone you meet, as the man says. So thanks for watching, guys. Check out the links in the description. Go to get the shirt, my awesome shirts. I really dig it. So thanks for watching, guys. I'll talk to you later.